After 7 years of being bullied and abused, Rudius was hung without any clothes for his graduation, and spent the rest of his life locked in isolation. His brother spent every day helping him cope with his half-incher, but even his parents couldn't convince him to leave his room, so he spent the next 20 years locked in, hating his miserable life. However, his violence began growing, so on a night while he was training for the Gunnar Olympics, his parents hired a group of hitmen that broke into his disgusting room. Although the Fatzo tried fighting back, the men knocked his ugly ass down before kicking him out of his home, as even his family didn't want him being alive. But when he saw Truck-Kun on his way to make 3 new Isekai'd protagonists, he jumped to save their lives, sacrificing his own in that instant. In his final moments, time and space began to distort while he heard voices in his mind, and as his heart began failing, he wished he wasn't dying a virgin. When he opened his eyes, he wondered how he was still alive, but saw this ugly dickhead trying to kiss him, while a hot-ass MILF grabbed him into her massive mommy milkers. But as he tried copying a feel of heaven, he realized he had reincarnated as a baby. As the months passed, he began finding the best hiding spots around his new home, but when Rudius managed to glance outside, he found Paul playing with his sword. As the shock caused him to lose his step, he fell down. But although his mom ran to make sure he was fine, Lilia still noticed he wasn't crying. As Zenith started casting a healing spell to take his pain away, Rudius began thinking his parents were a pair of psych ward patients. But a ray of magical light appeared around him, leaving him enchanted by it. By the time a year had passed, he was reading on his own, and had learned everything he wanted to know magic. So as he wanted to finally try it out, Rudius began casting a water spell, so as the magic flowed through his veins, it released a huge drop of water. However, when he tried again, he began concentrating the mana inside his body, and released a water ball. The shock from not reciting an incantation made him fall off, but as he realized he had run out of MP, he passed out. By the time he woke up, everyone thought he wet his pants, but as the weeks passed, his magical power began to grow, and he realized his mana was increasing. However, he spent the rest of his day wondering why he could use a spell without reciting an incantation. But every night, he would overhear his parents developing plot. Over time, he began thinking he was unique, and with his mana continuing to grow, he decided to attempt intermediate magic, and began casting a water spell as a cloud of mist surrounded him. When his parents rushed in, Paul wondered if a monster had attacked the house, but when Zenith noticed the Book of Magic, she asked if he read it out loud. But although Rudius tried to apologize, Zenith grew excited that her son was a genius, and wanted to hire a tutor for him to become an amazing mage. However, Paul said that he wanted their son to become a swordsman, so Lilia suggested they teach him magic in the morning, and swordsmanship in the afternoon. Within a few days, an ugly girl arrived at their home, introducing herself as Roxy Magurdia. She had come as the magic tutor, but Rudius noticed she was flatter than a surfboard. Just as their training began, Roxy explained the different types of magic, but as she decided to demonstrate an incantation, she launched a water ball at a tree, breaking it in half. However, when Rudius told her that Zenith worked hard to grow that tree, Roxy cast a healing spell to grow it back. But when she asked Rudius to give it a shot, he tried casting the spell. As a gentle breeze revealed Roxy's underwear, Rudius launched the water ball, but Roxy noticed he cut the incantation short. When she wondered if he always did so, Rudius told her that he usually just skipped that part, so she realized he'd be worth training after all. By the following year, Rudius could use fire and wind magic, and was excited that his training was paying off. However, his swordsmanship training was the complete opposite, because even as his father slashed a tree with a wooden sword, Rudius's attempt made his whole body shiver, but his useless father continued trying to teach him. One day, while Rudius watched 2 kids playing, the sight brought back his traumatic memories, forcing him to hide behind the wall. The following year, when Rudius turned 5, the family threw a feast to celebrate it, and his shitty father entertained them with a free performance. Before long, Roxy also gave him her own gift, a magic stone, saying that it amplified mana and would be useful for him. So as Rudius told her that he loved it, she revealed that she had taught him almost everything she knew, and said she would hold his graduation the next day. All through that night, Rudius stayed awake, but as he remembered how he was bullied in his previous life for his mushroom dick, he realized he was still haunted by his past. Even though he had wished to have superhuman powers that would make him braver, Rudius realized he still couldn't shake out of his trauma. The following day, after Roxy told Rudius that they were heading outside the village for his final exam, they realized he was afraid, but Roxy decided to put him on the horse. As they began heading out, the memories terrified Rudius, but when he realized they were at the village farms, he discovered that no one noticed his ugly face. After arriving at the plains, Roxy thought the spot was perfect and told him that she was ready to use a saint-level water magic, but said she would only cast it once. As she advanced by a few steps, she began casting a water spell, so as her magic stone activated, dark clouds began gathering in the sky. At that moment, Roxy summoned Cumulonimbus, invoking a rainstorm that nearly swept Rudius away, and a lightning struck the horse. Luckily, she managed to revive it with a healing spell, but as she asked Rudius to keep it a secret, he promised to not tell anyone that her head was emptier than her flat tits.
What did he say?
So as Rudius revealed his magic stone, Roxy summoned an earth barrier, so as Rudius began casting the spell, gathering thick clouds in the sky, a rainstorm began. After it was all over, Roxy told him that she had taught him everything she knew, and congratulated him for becoming a saint-level water mage, causing him to smile back at her. At dawn the next day, Roxy was ready to leave. For a parting gift, Roxy gave Rudius a necklace, saying it was a charm from her hometown, so Rudius promised to treasure it, and so she began to leave. Without ever knowing it, she was the first person to ever bring him outside and helped him recover from the trauma he was carrying underneath. However, the next day, the useless kid found Roxy's underwear that he had managed to hide, and his disgusting father tried developing plot with his mother again. When Rudius told them that he wanted to play outside, Paul wondered why he was finally acting his own age, but as he carried him off, he told him to be kind to people and said that a man's strength wasn't for pushing people around. Rudius agreed and said that a man's strength was for developing plot with a girl, but Paul wondered who the fuck this kid was. As Rudius went around the village, he realized it was beautiful, but soon came across 3 shitty losers bullying a kid and calling him a demon. As one disgusting fatso picked up a rock, Rudius rushed forward and blasted his useless face. He called them low-lives for bullying a single kid, and as he dodged their mud attacks, blasting another kid, the worthless bullies decided to retreat. When Rudius wondered if the guy was fine, he noticed he was beautiful, but wondered if he was swinging the other way. Wanting to clean him up, Rudius summoned a water ball, immediately stopping him from running off, before dousing him with warm water. Noticing his hair color, Rudius remembered that Roxy had told him to stay away from green-haired demons. But as he realized the boy had no red gem on his forehead, he thought he was a normal person. A few minutes later, he began drying his hair with wind magic, but when he wondered if he was a demon, the boy told him that he was a half-elf and soon began to cry. Before long, they began walking through the fields, but when the boy wondered why he saved him, Rudius revealed that his father had told him to protect the weak and said they were now friends. As he decided to introduce himself, he told him that his name was Sylph, but Rudius thought his name sounded like a wind spirit. When they arrived on a cliff, Sylph asked Rudius to teach him his water magic, but as Rudius told him that his useless brain would need to learn the incantations, he agreed to teach him anyway. At sunset, he returned the boy home to his family, but when he arrived back at his home, his father demanded to know why he beat up the worthless fatzos. When Rudius tried explaining what happened, Paul told him to apologize, but Rudius thought his useless father needed to get schooled. So as he began saying that he couldn't be intimidated into apologizing, he told Paul to kiss his ass, but his father smacked his face. Even so, Rudius was unfazed and told him that he still wouldn't apologize, as it would mean allowing a helpless kid to be bullied next time. Just then, Paul realized he was wrong, so as he apologized, he asked to know what happened. Before long, they entered the house, but as Paul remembered how the fatso's mother complained about her son's injury, he knew he had only gotten hard on his son to feel like a father for once. When it was summer, Rudius returned to his sword training, but as he grew exhausted, Sylph appeared before him. When they began their magic training, Rudius noticed that Sylph's mana had grown over the months, but as he showed him how to make warm water, Sylph asked to learn his incantationless casting. With Rudius unable to resist his pretty face, He eventually agreed and told him to imagine casting a spell without actually saying a word. However, as he watched Sylph's useless attempt, he realized Sylph could never master it, and hoped he was special after all. But at that moment, Sylph released a water ball, and even though Rudius was disappointed, his only friend was very excited. As he ran through the fields, Rudius tried running after him, but they soon laid down in exhaustion. Staring at his face, Rudius thought his childhood friend was beautiful, and realized it was a waste that he was a guy. By the following month, he discovered that his mother was carrying a second child, and all of them were happy. But a few days later, Lilia revealed that she was also pregnant. The discovery shocked everyone, as they wondered who the father was, but with Lilia never leaving the home, they soon realized who the father was.
When it comes to 1-year-old Dante, Pierre, you are the father.
As he admitted he was the father, Zenith slapped his useless face, and Rudius realized that his father was the most filthy lowlife he had ever met. But at least he wouldn't go to buy milk. By the time winter arrived, their family was completely destroyed, as all of them could only sit in depression. But when Zenith asked Lilia what she intended to do, Lilia told her that she would leave after assisting her with childbirth. However, realizing it would take a month to arrive back to her home, Zenith wondered how she would make it with a newborn. But when Paul tried butting in, she told him to shut his rotten mouth. But Rudius wondered if it was safe outside the village. The thought of Lilia collapsing in the snow made Rudius realize he needed to step in. He decided to ask if Lilia could ever say no to his father, and said the shameless loser was threatening her.
Huh? Congratulations, you played yourself.
As Zenith realized what might have happened, she tried asking Lilia if it was true, but the girl told her that it wasn't. Even so, Zenith thought she was afraid to admit it, since Paul was her master, but Paul realized he was fucked. As Rudius continued saying that it was Paul's fault, he said it was wrong to have Lilia suffer the consequences, and told Zenith that he didn't want anything to happen to his other sibling. So as the emotions overwhelmed Zenith, she finally agreed and told Lilia to stay as their family. The next day, while training, Paul overwhelmed Rudius with strikes, but Rudius told him to not take out his anger on him when he's the fuck up. At the same time, Lilia was watching them, but as she knew she was responsible for everything, she remembered that Paul's and Zenith's endless nights of plot development kept building her urges. So on one of those nights, she tried seducing Paul into her room, and knew she should have been punished for giving in to her desires. However, Rudius had saved her, even though she had dreaded him ever since he was a baby, and had thought he was a creepy perv because he stared at her cannons every time. So she swore that she would stop avoiding him from now on, and that she would spend the rest of her life repaying him, promising to also make her child serve him. After both babies were born, Paul tried making a dumbass face at them, but Rudius wondered if his father was any smarter than a 4th grader. However, Rudius and Lilia had began talking, and revealed that she used to train swords with Paul, until he snuck into her room and deflowered her one night. Even though he thought he was complete scum, Rudius respected him because he was strong, so the shameless scum smacked him away. With Paul having mastered the Sword God, Water God, and North God style, Rudius parried off his strike, knocking off his magic attack, and hit him with a back kick for cheating. Noticing Rudius was upset, Paul wondered if he was starting to consider him a role model, but Rudius clapped back, wondering if it was smart to cheat on his wife. As he told him to take his useless eyes off Lilia's huge tits, he said that Zenith would divorce his ass next time, but Paul wondered if he was already waiting to develop plot with Sylphie. Just then, Paul wondered if he wished to enroll at a school, but thought he was too smart for the other kids his age, since he could already read and write, and didn't want him to lose the gem he had here. Later that day, while he sat under a tree, he realized that Sylphie had a talent for magic, and thought she would eventually surpass him. So when she joined him, wondering what he was worried about, Rudius told her that he was thinking about leaving the village, but Sylphie threw herself on top of him, asking him to stay. Just then, she began to cry, so Rudius promised to never leave, and concluded on spending the rest of his life at the village. That night, when Paul barged into his room, he told him that he was sent a letter. So when Rudius realized it was from Roxy, who explained everything that had happened to her, he realized she wrote a recommendation letter for him to attend the Renoa Magic University. So a few days later, while they were having breakfast, Rudius told them that he wished to enroll at the Magic University, and offered to get a job so that he could pay for Sylphie's enrollment. With Paul not wanting to debate over it, he agreed to help him get a job. So a few days later, while they were training again, a carriage arrived, and a buff lady with huge dodgeballs appeared before them. Her name was Ghislaine, but as Rudius realized she was a beast person, Zenith and Lilia appeared at the same time. Noticing Zenith's baby, Ghislaine hoped she wouldn't be as useless as her father, but Zenith asked her to take care of Rudius. At that moment, Lilia told Rudius that they would miss him, but when he wondered what the f was going on, his asshole father told him that they were taking him away from Sylphie. With Rudius still clueless, his useless father hurled him away, but as he charged with his sword, Rudius blasted him with a fireball. However, Paul rushed through the smoke, so Rudius used his wind magic to maintain the distance. As he sucked his foot into mud, Paul continued on the offense, boosting his speed to dash forward. But as Rudius parried his sword, Paul eventually knocked him unconscious. By the time Rudius woke up, he realized he was inside the carriage, and saw Ghislaine before his eyes. But as he introduced himself, she told him that they would start working together. When Rudius tried saying there was a misunderstanding, Ghislaine hurled him a letter saying that she couldn't read, but asked him to read it out loud. So as Rudius did so, he discovered it was a letter to him from his useless father, and that he had found him a job as a tutor to a 9-year-old noble girl. The muscle brain woman was the family's bodyguard and sword instructor, so as Rudius discovered she would be training him with the sword, he realized that his worthless father was shameless. Eventually, Rudius discovered he would be tutoring the girl until he turned 12, and his father forbade him from sending any letters to Sylphie. After Rudius arrived in the town, he noticed all the maids were beastskin, and an ugly fatso poured him grape juice. When the master arrived, he told Rudius to greet like a noble, and introduced himself as Philip, the mayor of the city, saying that Paul was his cousin. Realizing his scoundrel father had family connections, Rudius discovered they were high-born. But when Philip wondered what he intended to charge, Rudius told him that he wanted enough to enroll in Magic University, so Philip offered to introduce him to his daughter. Before long, they began heading towards her room, so as Philip revealed that his daughter was a little willful, he said she only spoke to a few people. Just then, he entered her room, revealing that he had brought a new teacher, but as Rudius saw her for the first time, his entire body trembled. However, he managed to walk up to her and introduced himself, but she wondered why he was this f***ing ugly.
Yo, that one there was a violation. Personally, I wouldn't have it.
Rudius tried explaining that his ugly face didn't matter, but the girl smacked him for talking back. So as Rudius decided to hit her back, Eris punched his useless face. Growing angrier, she sat on top of him and began pounding his face, but Rudius blew her away with his wind magic before running away from the nutcase. Eventually, he managed to hide under a table, but as she searched for him, Rudius realized she was a f***ing criminal. A few hours later, he eventually made it back to the lounge, but when Philip wondered if he intended to quit, Rudius told him that he didn't, and suggested that they put on an act to trick her into studying. That night, after he was led to his room, Rudius hoped his plan would work and wished to succeed. So when he woke up at midnight and realized he was inside a wooden box, he thought his plans were in action and hoped to rescue her using magic and his knowledge. He thought it was all he needed to convince her, so as he realized she was awake, he told her that they had been abducted and locked up, but burnt off the ropes with a fire spell. Desperate to escape, Eris began calling for Ghislaine, but a man kicked down the door, and Rudius thought he deserved an Oscar for his performance. Just then, the man advanced towards Eris, and as he kicked her into the wall, she tried fighting back, but the man flung her away and stepped on her head. As he continued stumping on her, Rudius realized it was going beyond his plans, but she soon fell unconscious. Just then, the shit-face punched Rudius, calling him a gross little shit, but Rudius realized that Eris was already battered. Feeling bad for her, Rudius decided to cast healing magic, but as she was still weak, she asked him to heal her all the way. Ready to escape, Rudius melted the wall, but as he pretended to leave, Eris asked to follow him, so he blocked the door to stop the abductors from entering. However, they began banging on it, forcing the spikes to grow weaker, but as Eris realized it wouldn't hold for long, Rudius told her to promise she would be a good girl. By the time the men destroyed the spikes, they realized the pair had escaped. At the same time in an alley, Rudius cast another healing spell on Eris, but as the useless girl began yelling, she said she would never keep her promise to him. However, when Rudius decided to abandon her, she followed behind him, saying that she would keep her promise. When they noticed a sign directing towards Roa, Eris admitted that she couldn't read, and Rudius told her it was the reason why she was so retarded. Eventually, they began heading to Roa in a carriage, and as they started walking through the town, Rudius thought they were safer now, and noticed Eris was starting to feel sleepy. So far, he thought his plans had been perfect, and was glad that he had managed to earn her respect. Just then, the useless Fatzo appeared before them, and as Rudius recognized his face, he rushed towards him, but a man snatched Eris away. Immediately, Rudius ran after him, and as he summoned a wall of earth to block their path, he told them to release her, preparing a fireball. However, the Fatzo told him that they wouldn't, and the useless men asked him to join them for a cut. But Rudius told them that some things were more valuable than money, so as he raised the fireball, he launched it towards the sky like a signal flare, blowing up over the buildings, allowing Ghislaine to dive towards it. As Rudius began rushing forward, he hurled spikes that blew up as a man slashed it, and released a hill that destroyed another man's plot. Sliding off, he managed to save Eris from falling, but the second sliced his spike through the smoke. Desperate to escape, Rudius launched away, shooting fireballs and trapping the man's foot. However, he sliced through the fires and hurled his sword towards Rudius. At that moment, Rudius realized it was the sword-throwing technique of the North God style, but Ghislaine was rushing at the same time. Just as he thought his life would end, the blade shattered, and as Ghislaine analyzed the men's position, she slayed them before they could even move. The sight of the body paint left Rudius shaken, but when Ghislaine asked what happened, Rudius continued staring in shock. By morning, they arrived back at the manor, but when Philip wondered what happened, Ghislaine tossed the Fatzo face first, so as Philip realized he was responsible, he commanded for him to be taken away. But as Eris began heading home, Rudius thought he failed her, and remembered that he nearly lost his life. He wondered what would happen if he died again, and as he grew ashamed, he began walking away a failure. However, Eris commanded him to stop, and said she would grant him special permission to call her by her name. So as Rudius realized she had hired him, he began heading back. Later that day, Rudius apologized for what happened. But when he wondered why he was also abducted, Philip told him that every Grey Rat bloodline was useful politically and physically. As he reminded Rudius to keep everything a secret, Rudius realized that Ghislaine was officially taking all the credit for the rescue, so that the other bloodlines would acknowledge the Grey Rat's strength. Just then, a woman named Hilda arrived, but when Philip introduced Rudius as Eris's new tutor, he noticed her two huge melons. But Hilda ignored his shitty face. Right then, a man barged inside, so as Rudius saluted him, he realized he was nothing like his worthless father, and said he could stay at the manor. While Rudius was still confused, Philip told him that the man was his father, but when Soros wondered if Rudius saved Eris, Rudius tried saying that it was Ghislaine, but the man realized he was lying. Realizing Philip must have put him up to it, Soros summoned him and punched him away, but Philip decided to explain that he intended to thank Rudius as a family. With the useless man still angry, he decided to ask Rudius to teach Eris magic, and yelled her name to summon her. So as she rushed inside, Soros told her to ask for what she wanted, and screamed her name again like he was high on some weird shit. Realizing she couldn't talk her way out of this, as the weeks passed, Rudius watched the family eat breakfast, but during the day, he sparred with Eris in training, while Ghislaine screamed instructions from the side. Before long, Eris could summon a fireball, and Rudius continued working on his sand statues at night. So one day, while teaching Ghislaine math, they discovered that Eris had nearly burned down the house. But when he managed to put out the fire, he wished she would use her useless brain to learn reading and writing. However, Eris had already darted outside, so as Rudius began calling for her, he realized it had been the same routine for over a month, as the ugly bitch would always run away every time he tried to tutor her in reading and math. By the following day, Rudius began crying for Ghislaine's assistance, hoping she could make up a strategy to make Eris want to learn. So that day, during another class, Rudius noticed that Eris was getting agitated, and signaled Ghislaine to encourage her. At that moment, Ghislaine began saying that the sword was not all a person needed, and explained the story of her party, famously known as the Fangs of the Black Wolf. She told them that she had traveled alone after the party separated, but had barely survived because her useless brain didn't know basic math, forcing her to walk for days without food. For all of these reasons, she was now ready to learn math, and told Rudius that she was counting on him. So as her words managed to inspire Eris, she told Rudius to carry on with the lesson. However, the next day in training, she went hard on his weak ass, forcing him to defend, while Ghislaine screamed instructions from the side. So as Eris burst forward, hitting Rudius's ribs, she went even harder, but he barely managed to parry her attacks. Even so, she continued attacking, eventually making direct hits before knocking him down. With Rudius completely exhausted, Eris called him a wretched loser, but Ghislaine told her to shut her mouth. When she wondered why he was freezing up, Rudius told her he was afraid of blocking continued attacks, but she told him to fix himself up. However, Eris was eager to beat his ass again, and pulled him up for another round. A few days later, during class, Rudius noticed that Eris was getting agitated again, and as he knew he was in deep shit, he began stepping back, escaping before she could end him. The following day, they began heading into town together, but as Rudius decided to compliment her dress, the bitch hit his head. Inside the town, Eris began running around the streets, and after arriving inside the market, she grew more excited. However, Rudius was writing down the cost of items, wanting to understand the value of money, when a man called on him, guessing he was from the Lord's Manor. He showed him a bottle and revealed that it was a special medicine that would allow him to run a train on 10 women. So as Rudius thought it was the perfect thing his little guy needed, he decided to write it down. But when Eris tried snooping and asked what he wrote, Rudius told her gullible brain that he was writing the names and prices of goods. After arriving at the library, Rudius began writing the prices of books, but when Eris offered to buy him one, he wondered if her broke ass could afford it, but she told him that her grandfather would pay for it. Not wanting her to stay spoiled, Rudius decided to decline, saying that it wasn't her money, but suggested she ask her useless father to start giving her an allowance. A few days later, after they resumed the usual class, Rudius noticed that Eris's mood had improved ever since they began taking a day off a week. But as she gave him the special item as a gift, she told him that she had bought it for him. At the same time, Gillian revealed that Eris was now getting an allowance, but as Rudius got afraid, he hid it behind him and suggested they continue the lesson. However, Eris wasn't buying his bullshit and asked to know what the item was for. But as he tried to escape, Gillian restrained him. His desperate attempt to free himself made the bottle fall off, but as he tried saving the spilled content, he accidentally slipped up on what it was. Growing desperate, he tried running again, but Eris soon began tickling him, wanting to get the whole secret. A few weeks later, as Rudius watched Eris and Gillian sparring, hitting each other back and forth, Eris managed to dodge a feint, but as she returned, Gillian parried her away. However, she was impressed with Eris and told her that she would reach advanced rank soon. As these words made her excited, Rudius decided to smile, but the girls ignored his pathetic face. As the weeks went by, Eris and Gillian continued their lessons, but Eris wouldn't stop getting angry every time she got her answers wrong. However, during magic training, they successfully summoned a fireball, and Eris rushed to tell her mother, but when she noticed Rudius, she ignored him again, making him wonder what he did wrong. After a few more days, Rudius perfected Roxy's statue and was happy to have put in every single detail, and I mean every single f***ing detail. Just then, a maid knocked on his door, and as she told him that her name was Edna, she asked to speak with him. Inside the room, she told him that Eris would soon turn 10 years old, and that she was supposed to dance at the party to mark the occasion. However, Eris was the worst dancer she had ever seen, so as Edna revealed that she couldn't even master basic courtesy, she asked Rudius to give her some of his lesson time for her dance practice. Excited to get some free time, Rudius offered her all the time she needed, but told her he wasn't sick of the ugly bitch or anything like that. By the following day, Rudius was looking through the library with Philip, but as Rudius checked a book, he realized he couldn't read the language, so Philip told him that it was written in Beast God. With Rudius wanting to carry on anyway, he told him that he wanted to study it, so Philip gave him special permission to take out books. Later that day, Rudius began writing a letter to Roxy, explaining his experience in the manor and his desire to learn more languages. However, by the time winter was over, Rudius realized he hadn't made any progress. But as he heard Eris running away, Edna revealed that she really sucked at dancing. At this rate, she knew Eris would only embarrass herself and said she would be a laughingstock on her own birthday. So as she grew desperate, she asked him to convince Eris to return. But the thought made Rudius exhausted. Before long, he found Eris on a heap of hay, but as he tried climbing up to her, she kicked him down. Wanting to help anyway, he tried persuading her to return to her practice, but she told him that she hated it and would skip her own birthday. She thought it was useless doing something she wasn't good at, but as Rudius knew she would certainly regret it, he told her to continue anyway, saying that it would make her happy to finally master it. When he wondered if she was willing to give it a trial, Eris knocked his head, but as Rudius decided to give up on her, she told him to follow her. Before long, they began dancing together, but as Eris moved at a faster pace, Rudius tried telling her to slow down, but she hurled him away, sending him slamming into the wall. As more days went by, Rudius continued learning the beast god language, and Eris practiced her courtesy. So as Rudius decided to sell Roxy's statue, the merchant bought it for a gold coin, but Rudius was soon practicing with Eris. One night, a package arrived for him, and as he discovered it was from Roxy, the ugly piece of shit thought he could smell her scent all over the package. As he read her letter, he discovered she was still tutoring the worthless son of the Lord, who was always trying to feel her two small peaches and asking to see the color of her underwear. However, she had sent him a handwritten textbook on the demon god language, and Rudius realized it was all he needed. A few days later, he resumed dancing practice with Eris, and when it was over, Edna thought the useless girl could manage to make it through, but Rudius realized he wouldn't be her partner at the dance. On the day of Eris's 10th birthday, Soros introduced her as his granddaughter, so as he commanded for the main event to start, he asked a possible suitor to take Eris's hand. Just then, a boy stepped up to her, and as he asked her to dance, Eris took his hand. Following the sound of the instrument, they began moving in slow steps, but as Eris's pace quickened, she accidentally tripped on his foot. However, Soros told her to get her ass up, wondering if she couldn't dance, but the boy's ankle was already broken, and all the guests began whispering that she was an idiot after all. At that moment, Rudius knew she was hopeless, but decided to walk up to her, asking to dance. With a deep breath, he extended his hand and told her to dance like they practiced. So as they began dancing, Rudius managed to save Eris from falling, but as he realized she was nervous, everyone continued staring at them. However, they resumed their dance, and Rudius saved Eris once again, so as he told her to close her eyes, he said he would cast a charm to make her a good dancer, and directed her to move slowly once he gave the signal. So at his direction, Eris began following his movements, perfecting the dance steps with a smile until it was all over. As everyone began applauding them, Soros carried both of them on his shoulders, and they realized he was impressed. That night, Rudius presented Ghislaine and Eris with magic wands for their graduation. So as Ghislaine accepted it, Eris tried saying that she wanted a statue, but eventually decided to claim the wand. Imitating Ghislaine, she thanked him for the gift, so Ghislaine gave her a talisman, saying that it would save her from evil wolves. The following morning, while Rudius was walking around the manor, he spotted a tower, but as he climbed towards the top, he saw Soros getting into business. However, the legendary plot master already noticed him, so as the hot maid ran off, Rudius apologized for interrupting him. Without much thought, Soros told him to look towards space, and Rudius spotted another planet in the sky. When he wondered what it was, Soros told him that he didn't know, but thought it was nothing to worry about. So Rudius decided to say a prayer. A few months later, Eris and Ghislaine went at each other during sword training, with Eris having reached advanced rank in sword god style. At the same time, Rudius noticed that the mysterious planet was growing bigger and wondered what it really was. But as the weeks passed, Rudius spotted Eris pushing a cart inside, so he decided to spy on them, and discovered they intended to throw him a surprise 10th birthday party. But Eris wished he was from a different family, because in the Boreas bloodline, there was always a power struggle, and with Rudius having learned that his father's name was Paul Nodo's Grey Rat, he had discovered that the Nodos were one of the 4 main Grey Rat families. However, Paul's little brother was the head of all the bloodlines, but with a nasty reputation as a scum, there had been a covert movement to replace him. Rudius knew that his presence as a member of the Nodos bloodline could create unwelcome misunderstandings, as the other bloodlines could assume that the Boreas intended to use him to unseat the current head. A few weeks later, while Rudius was studying, Ghislaine wondered how he managed to master 3 languages in 2 years, but he told her that his brain was not half as useless as her own. However, when he tried getting a snack, Ghislaine stood at the door, suggesting they speak for a few minutes. But Rudius already figured that today was the special day. Deciding to leverage his opportunity, Rudius showed her a statue, but as she realized it was her, she began wondering why it had no tail. However, Rudius knew she was only bent on keeping him from leaving. That evening, everyone wished Rudius a happy birthday, and Eris presented him with a flower. However, as he pretended to be surprised, he began crying, saying that it was the first time he ever felt so welcome. But as the emotions overwhelmed Soros, he began declaring a war against Nodos. As he vowed to make Rudius the new head, a guard took him down and began dragging him away. But Rudius wondered if his acting was too good. When Eris told him that she had a surprise for him, Rudius wondered if it was his family. But as she revealed that they couldn't make it, Hilda pressed Rudius in between her plot.
Yeah, boy.
saying that he was now their son. Just then, she told him to marry Eris, and began telling Eris to be a good wife to him. But 2 other guards dragged away the nutcase. However, Eris eventually gave him the gift, so as Rudius realized it was a staff, a man told him that they had gathered the finest materials from around the world, and called it Aqua Harsha. From a glance, Rudius easily realized it must have cost a fortune, so as he said it was a valuable gift. Eris commanded the party to begin. However, when it was all over, Ghislaine carried Eris off to bed, but as Philip decided to explain that Eris actually had 2 brothers, he said they were taken away by his brother after he lost a succession dispute, because according to their tradition, all men of Boreas blood were raised in the household of the head of the family. So as Philip explained that the reality of losing her children had made Hilda hate him, he asked him not to hate her back. However, when he wondered if Rudius was willing to marry Eris and take over the Boreas family, he promised to handle the coup to eliminate the head, and said he would even prepare Eris for plot development. Realizing the entire family were a bunch of nutcases, Rudius decided to pass on his offer, saying that he would treat it as idle chit-chat. Meanwhile, Paul and other hunters were patrolling the forest, having discovered that monsters were increasing, and began slaying them. At the same time, Sylphie was visiting Rudius's home, but while Norn hid away from her pathetic face, Aisha was cleaning the home with Lilia. Just then, the disgusting loser arrived home. But as they noticed rumbling in the sky, Paul wondered what was in the clouds. Inside the dragon territory, a man was walking through the wilderness, but when a dragon appeared at that moment, it spewed fire on him. However, he was unscathed from the attack, so as the dragon landed before him, it eventually flew away. The man sensed that mana was gathering in the north, but as he wondered where it was from, he concluded on finding out. Inside the demon world, the great Emperor Kishirika spotted the gathering mana. But as she wondered who cast the spell, she began heading towards it. At the same time in the floating fortress, the Lord Perugius thought the mana was the light of summoning to undo the seal on the demon god Laplace. But when he summoned Almanfi, he told him to kill every suspicious person in the area. Meanwhile, Rudius, Ghislaine and Eris were heading to an open field, as Rudius was eager to cast his greatest water spell. However, when he summoned a huge water ball, he wondered how he did so with little mana. But as he began reciting the spell, enormous mana spread across the sky. Wondering what it was, Eris asked if it was his spell. But as Ghislaine revealed that it was an incredible amount of mana, she suggested they leave immediately. Just then, lightning whipped past Rudius, but as Ghislaine rushed forward, missing her target, she swiftly dodged a blast. As she returned, they began clashing swords, and the backlash of the wind nearly blew Rudius and Eris away. When they wondered who the man was, he told them that he was Almanfi the Radiant, and that he was sent to slay the source of the disturbance. He thought that killing Rudius would dispel the mana, but Ghislaine introduced herself as the Sword King, and said that they had nothing to do with it. With Almanfi accepting her words as true, he decided to sheathe his blade, but Rudius wondered what the fuck was happening. Before his useless brain could comprehend, the planet disappeared, and Almanfi vanished instantly. So as the mana gathered into a single ball, it released an energy beam that stretched across the field, consuming Ghislaine. When Rudius tried to escape, he realized that Eris had frozen up, and decided to cover her as they were consumed together. As he opened his eyes, he realized he was inside the heavenly realm, and thought his life was all over. However, God appeared before him, saying that he was the man god, and revealed that he had been watching him and was on his side. Not buying it, Rudius thought he was a shitty liar, and began saying that he wouldn't trust him. However, the man god told him that he was only interested in his present life, and revealed that his body was in his mental form. As he explained that he would be returning into his 10-year-old body, Rudius realized it was all a dream. But as the man god told him that he would die, he revealed that the demon continent was a harsh land, and said he would become food for monsters. Growing desperate, Rudius wondered what he meant, so the man god explained that he was caught in a massive mana cataclysm, and was teleported to the demon continent. When Rudius wondered what he could do, the man god told him that he would spot a man close when he woke up, and asked him to rely on him and help him. Just then, Rudius opened his eyes to see the stars, but noticed Eris asleep next to him. Spotting the man, Rudius wondered if he was Ghislaine, but as he noticed the red gem inside his forehead, he realized he was a spurred and began backing away. While shivering, he managed to hold his staff, and realized the man had no desire to attack him. But as he decided to greet him, the man told him that they fell from the sky. He had made a fire to warn them up, but when he wondered why Rudius wasn't afraid, Rudius told him that it would be a rude way to thank him. But the man thought this kid was weird. However, he revealed that his name was Ruijerd and said they were in the northeast of the demon continent, but promised to escort them back home. As he placed a hand on Rudius's head, he told him that abandoning them would damage his tribe's reputation, even though it was already damaged beyond repair. Just then, Eris began screaming at the sight of him, and as she screamed in fear, calling for Ghislaine, she began to cry. However, a few hours later, she managed to introduce herself, but soon began saying that her mother was a disgusting liar for having told her that she would be eaten by a spurd if she stayed up late. The following day, after arriving at the desert, Eris was excited to be in the demon continent, but they soon began traveling across the dry desert, and Rudius summoned water every time they got thirsty. Eventually, they saw Ruijerd killing a giant turtle, but when they began to leave, Eris wondered how he managed to spot it. So Ruijerd told her that his third eye could see everything. Just then, they spotted a village, but after they arrived at the border, a man named Rowan said they weren't allowed to enter. However, Ruijerd threatened to crack his useless skull, so as Rowan grew afraid for himself, he summoned the chief using telepathy. The chief introduced himself as Raucus, and Rudius was happy that he learned the demon god language. But when the man noticed his necklace, Rudius revealed that it was given to him by his master. Revealing her name was Roxy, Rowan discovered it was his daughter, and Rudius realized that they were in Roxy's hometown. So as they began walking through the village, Rowan revealed that Roxy left 20 years ago, and wondered if she was safe. As Rudius told him that she was, he began walking away. Later that night, after Rudius put Eris to sleep, Raucus wondered how they intended to get home. But Ruijerd said he would go with them, and would never leave them alone. With Ruijerd already banned from entering cities, Raucus wondered how he would manage to do so. But Ruijerd vowed to kill anyone who tried to stop him. Figuring Ruijerd was still haunted by his past, Raucus wondered if he could accomplish his goal forcefully. However, Rudius decided to ask what his goal was, so Raucus told him that Ruijerd intended to erase the reputation surrounding the Spurd tribe, but Rudius thought it was impossible, because the entire world already hated them. When Rudius wondered if the tribe had truly attacked everyone in the war, Ruijerd grew angry, saying that it was not true, and revealed that it was Laplace's scheme. As he began explaining that Laplace had betrayed them, he revealed that he had given them a spear during the war that made them lose control and begin attacking each other. However, they never realized what was happening until they had annihilated their entire family. Wielding his new spear, Ruijerd revealed that it was the soul of his son who gave his life to break the curse, but said that their terrible reputation was their punishment for trusting Laplace. Being the leader of his clan's warriors, Ruijerd said it was his duty to clear their name, so as Rudius realized he was drowning in guilt, he promised to help him, saying that he would do everything he could. The following day, as they were ready to leave, Rowan gifted Rudius a blade, saying it was their parting gift, and Eris decided to bow. When they continued their walk through the desert, Rudius realized he was still intrigued by Ruijerd's story, and as he was determined to keep to his promise, he told him that he was happy to travel by his side. Before long, Eris slayed a pack of monsters, and after she was done, she began devouring their meat. She had always dreamed of living in the wild, and thought she was finally living her dream. But Rudius knew he was living a nightmare. A few days later, they arrived at a huge cliff, and Ruijerd revealed that the city of Rikarisu was beyond it. However, when they arrived at the gates, Rudius discovered that security were on the alert, having spotted Ruijerd within the area. They had nicknamed him Dead End, believing he would kill whomever he came across. But as Rudius began wondering how he could sneak Ruijerd inside, he noticed a glistening substance. Figuring the perfect plan, they began heading towards the gate together, easily making their way inside. After they entered the city, Eris bought a robe at the market, but Rudius realized he was getting broke. As Rudius suggested they register at an adventurer's guild, he said they needed it to earn some money, and thought he could also continue with his plans for Ruijerd. So as they burst inside the guild, pretending to be badass adventurers, Rudius called the demons a sorry bunch of low lives. But when they wondered who he was, he introduced Ruijerd as the devil of the Spurd tribe. However, they all began laughing at his worthless face, wondering why a member of the Spurd tribe had blue hair. But Rudius thought his plan was working perfectly, so when he noticed huge weapons of mass distraction, he thought it was the greatest reality TV since Bikini Barbershop, and registered his party as Dead End. However, when they tried taking up a job, an ugly horse head snatched it away, telling Rudius to pick jobs their own size, and to try finding a lost cat. But as Rudius suggested they leave, all the demons continued laughing at them. A few minutes later, while they walked through the street, Eris wondered why Rudius didn't choose a job, but he told her to celebrate their success instead. because no one was afraid when he introduced Ruijerd as Dead End. His entire plan was to make Ruijerd appear a normal demon, and he thought everyone would eventually believe if they continued doing good deeds. At night, when they tried to lodge inside an inn, a group of worthless adventurers arrived, but as the leader invited Eris to dinner and pulled her, her button snapped. This made her angry, so she hit them with a single punch and began stomping on the moron. However, Rudius healed him with magic, but as the kid asked him to join his party, Rudius revealed that he already had one, wanting to persuade him anyway. Later that night, Rudius realized that Eris was still sad about her robe, so he promised to help her mend it. However, he knew he was already a brokey, and as he wondered how they could make enough money, he thought he would be bankrupt in no time. As he slept, he woke up again in the heavenly realm, and the man god told him to accept the lost kitten job, revealing that it would put an end to his worries. So the next day, they began searching for the kitten, but Ruijerd eventually led them to a cave. He told them that a group of animals were inside, and took a lamp to lead the way. But when they found the cat, Rudius realized it was actually huge. At the same time, they discovered that a bunch of animals had been locked up in the cells, but when they sensed someone's arrival, 3 losers began walking down the cave. Before they knew it, 2 of them sank into quicksand, and as Eris and Ruijerd rushed towards them, knocking them into the wall, Rudius used the power of his staff to restrain them. Rudius was relieved that they were a group of weaklings, but as the leader demanded to know who they were, Rudius tried asking him a question, but got kicked off into the wall. Before Rudius could recover, the loser's head rolled off, and Rudius realized that Ruijerd had killed him. The sight left him shaken, and he wondered why Ruijerd killed him, but Ruijerd called it his punishment for hitting a child. However, Rudius thought his excuse was more disgusting than his face, and said that killing people would make his reputation worse. Even so, Ruijerd thought his words were ridiculous, but as Eris grew angry, she told him that his attitude was the reason why no one liked his useless face, but Rudius asked him to not kill anyone anymore. At the same time, the 2 other losers grew afraid at the discovery of who Ruijerd was, but when Rudius wondered why they stole the animals, the reptile told him that they abducted them so that they could claim the reward as a lost pet. Realizing they were scums, Ruijerd thought they deserved to die, but Rudius managed to stop him. Figuring a new plan, Rudius asked them to team up with him, but Ruijerd wondered why they would team up with the shitty losers. As Rudius tried saying that he had a plan, he explained that they could earn more money if they worked together, but Ruijerd nearly ended the reptile, saying that he wouldn't work with villains. However, Eris punched his face, telling him to stop complaining, and reminded him that he had done worse things. As she began punching him, saying that Rudius could make everything work, she told him to get lost if he wanted, but Ruijerd said he wouldn't abandon them until they got home safely. The following day, the reptile revealed that he had raised their party to C rank, but when Rudius told him to take a B rank job the next day, he realized that Rudius intended to switch jobs with them. But as they began to leave, Rudius asked him to spread good words about Dead End, and to make everyone believe they were decent. A few days later, Rudius, Eris, and Ruijerd headed deep into the desert to complete their second quest of investigating a monster, and Rudius thought they would make a lot of money if they managed to kill it. When they arrived inside the forest, Eris noticed 2 separate groups of adventurers, and a pig told Kurt's group to back off. As Rudius stepped in to settle the quarrel, he revealed that they came to investigate a mysterious monster, but soon discovered that they were all booked for the same quest. Not willing to give it up, the pig began heading off with his party, but Kurt followed with his companions. However, when Rudius and Eris tried heading in a new direction, Ruijerd told them that he was worried about the other kids, and said he would not allow them to die. As they watched the losers from a distance, Ruijerd thought they were being careless, and a monster spider appeared at that moment. However, Rudius stopped Ruijerd from charging, saying they weren't desperate, but at the same time, a huge anaconda also appeared. With the boys cornered, Rudius persuaded Ruijerd to wait, hoping to swoop in at the last second and boost Ruijerd's reputation. As he thought his plan was perfect, he saw a body fly away, and knew that one of the boys had been Isekai'd. Immediately, Ruijerd and Eris charged forward, and Ruijerd annihilated the spider with his spear. At the same time, Eris evaded the serpent's attacks, baiting it toward a tree, but as she dodged again, she sliced it instantly. With both monsters dead, Ruijerd demanded to know why Rudius had stopped him, saying that he could have saved the dead kid. However, when Rudius tried explaining his intention, Ruijerd backed him into the tree, saying that his excuse was unforgivable. At that moment, Kurt began asking them to settle, saying that he was at fault for the loss of their comrade. As he tried to free Rudius, he began saying that they were adventurers, and that they were responsible for their decision to enter the forest. As Kurt began to cry, sad to have lost his friend, Ruijerd called him a full-fledged warrior, but the poor kid continued to sob. A few minutes later, when Kurt and his companion were ready to leave, they waved them off and walked out of the forest. Before long, Rudius, Eris, and Ruijerd began hearing battle noises, and as they figured the other adventurers were fighting, they began running towards the noise. However, they discovered that the entire party had been killed, but saw a red hood cobra slithering across the trees. Thinking it was the mysterious monster, Eris suggested they save the pig, so when Ruijerd told them that they could definitely kill it, Rudius commanded them to attack. Immediately, he tried blasting it, but with the serpent having dodged, Ruijerd leaped 200 feet, slicing it across the body. At the same time, Eris tried to end it, but as her sword couldn't cut through, the serpent knocked her off towards the trees. Just then, Rudius missed another blast, but Ruijerd stopped the serpent from devouring him. At his command, Eris eventually sliced it in half, so as Rudius noticed an opening, he blasted it, leaving a gaping hole inside. Realizing the serpent was dead, Eris began celebrating their victory, but as Rudius was relieved that they succeeded, Ruijerd told him that they failed, making Rudius realize that the pig had passed away. By the time they returned to the city, they realized that the ugly horse face had been waiting for them, but as he revealed that he forced the two losers to confess everything, he said he would report them to the guild and have their licenses revoked. Knowing the douchebag was up to no good, Rudius demanded to know what he wanted, so the shit-face told him that he wanted half of their monthly earnings. However, Rudius grew angry and began wondering why all his plans had been going wrong. But as he took Eris's hand, he knew that he needed to take her home no matter what. So as he activated the magic in his staff, forcing clouds to gather in the sky, he was ready to end the shit's worthless life. As everyone ran away in fear, Ruijerd advanced towards the loser, and as he raised him with a single hand, he threatened to end his life if he reported to the guild. Just then, he began leaping out of the city, but when Rudius noticed that Kurt and his companion were afraid, he wondered why they were terrified of Ruijerd even after he saved their lives. However, when they were still too shaken, he decided to leave, and Eris followed him. That night, they began calling for Ruijerd in the desert. But when he appeared before them, Rudius decided to apologize for getting carried away, and called all his schemes childish. However, Ruijerd thanked him for carrying all of the burden, and said he finally sensed his resolve. He had figured he was desperate to protect Eris, so as he told him that having someone to protect made him a warrior, he explained that being a warrior meant protecting his comrades and loved ones. Even though he couldn't restore his clan's reputation, Ruijerd vowed to protect them, and told Rudius to focus on whom he wanted to protect. However, Rudius renewed his promise to restore his reputation, saying that he trusted him and wanted to repay him, and eventually shook his hand. The following morning, Rudius discovered that Ruijerd had shaved off his hair, so as Ruijerd told him that it frightened a lot of people, Eris thought he looked like a classic shiny shit stain. Just then, Ruijerd decided to cover his third eye with a headband, but as Rudius began suggesting they work together, he thought it was the best way to avoid a disagreement. So with their first dead-end meeting ready to begin, he declared the goal was to reach the Asura kingdom. A few months later, when they arrived at the ocean, Eris was excited seeing it for the first time, and began saying that she wanted to swim. After going through the town, they met the captain of a ship, and after they explained that they wanted passage to the Millie's continent, they were shocked to discover that it cost over $20,000. So while they were trying to have lunch in a local inn, Rudius began saying that they couldn't possibly afford the money in 50 years even as S ranks, but Ruijerd apologized for being a burden. Wanting to make him feel better, Eris promised to use her empty head, so Rudius suggested they spend some time scouting out their options. However, that night, Rudius was worried that he had no means of getting them out, but when he slept, he realized he was back in the heavenly realm, and the man-god apologized for getting him into deeper shit with his last advice. When Rudius told him that his worthless face was making things worse, the man-god told him that he had another advice for him. He told him to buy food from a street vendor and to take a walk through the back alleys, but as Rudius thought it was another shitty advice, He wondered what would happen, but the man god told him that it was a surprise for tomorrow. So in the morning, after Rudius split from the others, Eris and Ruijerd began sparring. But as she tried to maintain her offense, Ruijerd successfully kept her at bay. Just as he spotted a girl, Eris leveraged his distraction to land a kick, and she grew excited that she was finally getting stronger. Meanwhile, Rudius was walking through the back alleys, wondering if he should continue walking just as the man god instructed him. But when he came across a stinking girl begging for food, he thought she was the one he was looking for. A few minutes later, she began consuming all of the food, and just as she was done, she leaped over him to the other side. As she thanked him for his help, she said it would sustain her for another year, but Rudius thought she looked like a giant isopod. When she revealed that her name was Kishirika, she told him that she was the great emperor of the demon world. But as Rudius thought she was a circus clown playing Demon King, he decided to play along. He told her that he had no idea she had resurrected, and begged for pertinence. But Kishirika observed him with a new eyeball, and as she saw through him, she began calling him a disgusting perv. However, Rudius thought she was worse for looking like a $5 budget succubus, but when she told him that she would grant him one wish.
じゃあ巨万求めを。見ての通りスカンピンじゃ。
When Rudius asked for half the world, Kishirika told him that she hadn't conquered the world herself. With Rudius losing all hope, he decided to ask what she could offer him, so she told him demon eyes, and shoved an eyeball into his face. As Rudius began screaming, he realized his vision was in twos, but when he watched Kishirika leap onto the roof, he realized he could see the future with his new eye of foresight. When he began heading back, the foresight made him sick. But as a man bumped into him and began asking why his sleazy ass couldn't walk straight, Rudius used his wind magic to save his life. By the time the man realized what happened, he stared at Rudius as he walked away. That evening, after Rudius explained how he got the eye, Ruijerd revealed that Kishirika actually had 12 eyes in her body, but Eris hoped to run into her. By the following week, Rudius had gotten the hang of his demon eye, so as he sparred with Eris, he easily saw through her attacks. As he dodged her slashes, knocking off her sword, he dodged her sneak attack and evaded her headbutt. Before she could stand, he pinned her down, but when Ruijerd told them to stop, Eris offered him her hand. Just as he shook it, he restrained her before she could land a punch. But when her defeat made her face turn red, the crybaby said she was going home. With Rudius's confidence growing, he thought he could take on Ruijerd himself, but by the time they returned to their room, his face was clapped harder than I clap your mom at night. That night, Rudius tried sneaking out, but when Ruijerd asked him where he was going, Rudius told him that he intended to visit a brothel. Knowing he only had a millimeter Peter, Ruijerd told him to come up with a better lie, and asked if he intended to sell his staff. When Rudius admitted that he did, Ruijerd asked if the staff meant nothing to him, and wondered why he was still trying to do everything himself. Rudius reminded him that they had been stranded for a week, and said he had no choice because their last option was getting smuggled. Thinking he was responsible for their misfortune, Ruijerd told him that their problem was his fault. However, he said his pride wouldn't allow him to sell his staff, as he thought that giving up his staff would break their party, so he told Rudius to look for smugglers instead. Just then, the rotten loser from earlier appeared. But as he said that he wasn't here to fight, he told Rudius that he came to thank him, introducing himself as Gallus. Meanwhile, Roxy and two adventurers had arrived at an inn in the same town, in search of Paul's family. But when one of them, named Elinalize, began flirting with the men, Roxy wished she wasn't so flat. So as she decided to go around the town, interrogating the people, she learned at the end of the day about Rudius's group called Dead End, but concluded that it was a dangerous party of Spurred. When she explained that they gained fame on the demon continent after the Mana Cataclysm, Elinalize began saying that he must be a tall, handsome spearman, and wished she could feel his spear penetrating her plot armor. As Talhan began saying that they were a party of 3, he revealed that one of them was actually a little mage who was always up to no good, so Roxy began reconsidering her conclusion, but suggested they still stayed away. The next day, she decided to take a walk across the beach, but came across Ruijerd and Eris sparring. Noticing Ruijerd's spear and Eris's hair, she easily concluded that they were Dead End. But it was at the same time Ruijerd noticed her presence, which caused the distraction that allowed Eris to land a kick, but Roxy wouldn't stop running. Without even realizing it, she narrowly missed Rudius in the back alley, and even after making it to her room, she continued hoping she wouldn't be hunted down. By the next day, they decided to leave the town, but she was disappointed that they didn't get any leads on Paul's family. That night, Gallus helped to transport Rudyard across the sea, hoping that they'd help to liberate smuggled goods in exchange. So while Rudius and Eris were traveling across the sea the next day, Rudius imagined a series of things that ultimately led to being Eris's love interest while trapped with her on a desert island. However, Eris was seasick all through the voyage, and Rudius spent all of his time casting a healing spell on her. After a few days, they made it to the Millis continent, but as Eris hoped to never get on another ship, Rudius told her that they would be sailing again to the central continent. Just as he was about to leave, he told her that he intended to fetch Rudyard, and asked her to wait until his return. When he arrived at a house, a man revealed a secret entrance and led him down the passage. So as Rudius noticed the smugglers, he realized that this was their hideout, but spotted a huge dog as he walked. At the same time, a beast girl was crying in one of the cells, and she extended her hand towards Rudius for help, but Rudius looked away as they shut her up. When he arrived in Rudyard's cell, Rudius tried to set him free, but Rudyard began telling him that there were captured beastkin children here, and revealed that one of them was killed for crying too loudly. When Rudius wondered if the children were the goods they were supposed to liberate, Rudyard told him that they must be, and said they must save them all. Right then, a smuggler appeared, telling them to get out already, but Rudyard told Rudius that he wouldn't allow him to get his hands dirty, as he reminded him that his hands were for keeping Eris safe. Just as Rudius freed him, his horrendous face scared the smuggler into backing away, but he wondered if he was a real Spurd. As Rudyard easily ended his life, Rudius found the beastskin while Rudyard was attacking the others. But when they began growling at the sight of his perv face, he laid down his staff to put them at ease. Before long, they began hearing footsteps in the hallway, but when Rudyard appeared, he told them that it was over. So as Rudius decided to speak beast language, he asked the girls to follow them, saying that they'd take them far away to the nearest village. After they made it out of the hideout, Rudius noticed that all the smugglers had been killed, but when one of them began meowing, she said there was a dog in the underground, and wondered why they didn't save it. Wanting to be a good guy, Rudius offered to go back for it, and asked Rudyard to watch over them. When he arrived back at the dog's cell, he was repelled by a barrier, so as he noticed a crystal above, he shot it down with a rock. With the dog finally freed, it jumped on top of him, but as Rudius realized its fur was soft, he began rubbing its body. Before he knew it, a man appeared outside the cell, and just as Rudius noticed him, he released a gust of wind that weakened every bone in his body. As he began telling their chief that he incapacitated one of the smugglers, the chief wondered if he was seeing with his axe, but the man suggested they force him to tell them where the children were. Picking up a familiar scent, the chief revealed that it was headed towards the city, so he said he would follow it, but directed the man to return to the village with Rudius. When the man began heading back, he threatened to lock Rudius away in a prison forever, making the kid realize he was fucked. A few days later, while Rudius was in the prison, he tried persuading a beast girl that he was innocent, but she doused him with dirty water and called him a deviant. The following day, when she returned, Rudius noticed her two jiggling balls, but she doused him with dirty water again. As more days passed, Rudius wondered why Rudyard hadn't come to his rescue, and hoped nothing went wrong. After a week had passed, another dude was thrown into his prison. But when he saw Rudius welcomed him to the last stop on the road of life and called him a newbie. But as they noticed it was getting hot and smoky, they discovered that the village was on fire. Just as an ember fell on their mattress, the prison began to burn, so Rudius reshaped a rock into a key, and utilized it in opening the lock. As they jumped out to safety, they began running across the bridge, but the smugglers were attacking the village at the same time. When Rudius watched them from the bridge, the sight made him angry, but as he knew he couldn't ignore the cries of the beast girls, he said he'd save them. So as he caught one of the smugglers in quicksand, he stepped on his face, but when Rudius decided to gather cold air into the skies, he released rain from above and doused the fires. However, when the enemies realized there was a mage around, East drew his blade to keep them away, but the beastman charged in and slaughtered two of the enemies. After he had slaughtered the rest, Jais revealed that he intended to rescue his captured kin, and asked for Rudius's help. So just before the others could leave, Rudius trapped them in quicksand, allowing Jais to eliminate them. Just then, Gallus appeared with one of the girls, and began saying that they used Eris and Rudyard in distracting the beast warriors. So Rudius revealed that he had suspected something was wrong. When Gallus went on to say that they were merely a decoy, he raised his sword to end the girl, but Jais began rushing towards him. Just as Gallus flung the girl, he easily killed two beastmen and cut across Jais's body. So as he took back the girl, Geese noticed he was using the North God fighting style, so Gallus decided to reveal that he was a North Saint, and challenged Rudius to fight him. However, Rudius was unwilling to risk his life and watched him as he walked by. But the girl began crying for help. Right then, the dog rushed at Gallus, and as it bit his arm, Rudius knocked him off with a wind blast. As Gallus grew angry, Rudius realized he couldn't back down anymore, so as he began running at him, Rudius activated his Eye of Foresight and started shooting rocks at him. However, Gallus evaded them all, and even dodged the beast, but as Rudius dodged his attack, he began summoning rocks into his path and thought he could win. But just as he noticed Gallus's hand, he knew he was too slow, so Gallus tossed a knife into his leg. With Rudius wounded, Gallus tried to eliminate him, but the dog caught his blade and dodged just as he swung another. So as Geese threw sand in his face, Rudius released a mighty blast from his staff, catching Gallus in the explosion. And just as they realized the loser was dead, Rudius passed out from exhaustion. The following day, when the dog woke him up, Rudius realized that Eris and Ruijerd had found him, so Ruijerd told him that he was in the chief's house. Just then, Jais and the beast girl began asking for forgiveness, and said they were prepared to accept his punishment, but the chief told him thank you for saving their kin. Those were the words Rudius wanted to hear, but as he decided to ask Eris why it took so long to find him, she explained everything that happened. A few days later, while Eris was teaching the beast girls her language, Jais noticed her ring, and wondered how she got it. However, when Eris revealed that Ghislaine gave it to her on her 10th birthday, she noticed the beast people were silent. But when Rudius wondered why, Jais told them that they thought she was dead. When Rudius wondered what must have happened, Jais explained that she abandoned her duty to guard the forest and the sacred beast. So as he called her a disgrace, he began pulling his daughter away. But with Eris already angry, she decided to go after him. She told him that Ghislaine was her master and said she respected her more than anyone else. But as she began to cry, Rudius decided to calm her down and said the Ghislaine they knew was different from the Ghislaine the beast people knew. With Jais growing curious, he decided to ask if Ghislaine really became an admirable person, so Rudius told him that even he respected her. The following morning, when Tona and Tersina met Eris, Tona asked to know more about Ghislaine and revealed that she was Jais's little sister. As Eris decided to explain that Ghislaine was her swordsmanship instructor, she said she'd always save her ass every time she was in trouble, and was grateful to her for teaching her the way of the sword. Hearing that, Tona decided to ask Eris to teach her how to use the sword, so as Eris saw the determination in her eyes, she decided to agree. From that day on, they began sparring, but Eris easily saw through all of Tona's attacks. While Rudius was watching from a distance, Jais joined him, revealing that Tona always refused to learn swordsmanship no matter how often he told her to. However, when he decided to ask if Ghislaine was really Eris's master, Rudius told him that she was, and revealed that she was the Sword King. As he added that she was also his student in magic, he said she even learned reading, writing, and arithmetic. When Jais was in disbelief, Rudius told him that people change. As the months passed, Eris and Tona continued sparring, but with Tona having improved, both girls were excited at their clash. However, that evening, when Tersina noticed that the raining season was coming to an end, Eris grew excited that they would finally move on to the next town. So when Tona asked her to stay with them forever, Eris told her that she needed to return home, and said she'd definitely leave after the rainy season. At the same time, Rudius was proud of his figure and thought he was getting creative, but when he began cuddling the sacred beast, the beast girl arrived and told him to quit being a horn dog. Right then, Tersina arrived to tell them that Tona and Eris were fighting, and they found them punching each other and rolling around. However, they managed to separate them, so Tersina explained that Tona attacked first because she wanted Eris to stay forever. At night, Tersina began telling Tona to apologize to Eris, but when she refused, her father revealed that they were leaving tomorrow. However, when she still wouldn't yield, Jais began explaining the past, and revealed that Ghislaine had none of the makings of a great swordswoman. As a matter of fact, she wouldn't learn to speak properly, and was a ruffian who hit people every time she was in a bad mood. For that reason, no one had liked her, and they willingly gave her away when a wandering swordsman came to their village. However, Jais now regretted giving up on her, and wished he understood her better, so he wondered if Tona also wanted to be filled with regret. At the same time, Rudius was telling Eris that they would make a beeline for Miliz, and said they'd never be able to return again. But when he heard a noise outside, he realized it was Tona and Tersina. Knowing why they'd come, Rudius decided to take a walk. But when the girls tiptoed inside, Eris demanded to know what they wanted. As Tona decided to apologize for being selfish, Eris forgave her, and soon realized that Tersina made her a wooden figure. By the time it was morning, Rudius and his party were ready to leave, and the chief thanked Ruijerd for keeping them safe throughout the rainy season. Just as they shook hands, Rudius wondered when they became best buds, but the chief told him that he was always welcome in their village. At the same time, Eris and the Beast Girls were crying, but she promised to return. Just as Jais appeared, he asked Eris to spar with him, saying that he wanted to see the swordsmanship Ghislaine taught her. Excited at the prospect, Eris accepted. So as they faced off, they began rushing towards each other, and as they clashed blades, Eris began screaming that she lost. But Rudius wondered what the fuck just happened. When Jais told her that she was welcome, he asked her to tell Ghislaine the same thing. But Eris said she'd win next time. Even so, Rudius didn't understand shit, but when they began to leave, they waved each other goodbye. However, Geese managed to catch up with their wagon, and as he revealed that he escaped from his cell, he asked to hitch a ride. As the days passed, they continued traveling through mountains and forests, and eventually arrived at the capital of the holy country of Milis. But when Geese decided to bid them goodbye, he said he'd see them again, but just as he began to leave, he told Rudius to visit the Adventurers Guild. However, they decided to go around the town instead, and at night they settled inside an inn. So as they started their strategy meeting, Rudius began saying that he was happy that they finally made it back to human territory, but suggested that they remain here so that they could earn money. When Eris wondered why, Rudius explained that they needed to earn enough money for their next boat, and revealed that he also planned to work on improving the Spur's reputation at the same time. Revealing a Ruijerd figure, Rudius explained that they would give one to everyone they saved, as he hoped it would help in saving the Spur's reputation. So as he suggested they take the next day off, he said he wanted to mass-produce the figure, and would also write a letter home. However, when he wondered what both of them intended to do, Eris said she would go goblin slaying. But Rudius knew that the only thing that would get slayed was her shitty face. As Ruijerd supported her, Eris continued saying that she could handle goblins on her own. But Rudius thought they sounded like words on her monument. The following morning, while Rudius was trying to draft a letter to Paul, he spotted a man rush off with a captured kid, and wondered why the world was filled with kidnappers. Even though he wanted to stay out of it, he remembered that their rule was to never abandon a child, so he decided to trail the man. After following him to an abandoned church, he realized there were more of them, but wondered how he could save the kid. However, when he began rummaging through a crate, he noticed a small piece of clothing. When they realized he was an intruder, they began calling for backup, so Rudius decided to reveal himself, as he called them a group of shameful kidnappers. With the men growing afraid, they wondered who he was, so Rudius told them that he was Ruijerd of Dead End. When they tried telling him to go goof off somewhere else, Rudius launched a sunrise attack, but when he checked the boy, he realized the kid's face was familiar. Just then, 3 more arrived, but when they realized their men had been knocked down, they watched the useless perv as he smelled the underwear. The sight made the girls disgusted, but as one of them began attacking him, Rudius easily dodged all of her attacks, but couldn't keep his eyes away from her jiggling tits. So as another girl launched a water ball, Rudius repelled it, but when the first girl continued her attack, he realized her tits were huge. With the girl growing angrier, she called him a deviant, but their leader arrived at that moment. As Rudius noticed he was drunk, he realized his movements were familiar, and just as the man readied himself, he burst forward, parrying Rudius's attacks. So as Rudius grew anxious, he trapped him inside mud. But the man started crawling towards him, evading all his attacks. And just as he cut through Rudius's wall, Rudius dodged his strike. But when the panties fell off, the man called him Rudy. Realizing his father only ever called him that name, Rudius examined the man before him. And even though he was barely recognizable, Rudius realized he was Paul. A few minutes later, while they were in a bar, Rudius noticed everyone was watching them, but decided to fix his gaze on those 2 very ripe melons. When Paul began saying that he was glad to see him still alive, Rudius wondered why he was here. But Paul asked if he saw none of his messages. Noticing Rudius was confused, Paul decided to ask what he had been doing all this time. But after Rudius explained everything that happened, Paul grew angry, and began saying that he had been goofing off for the past year and a half. When Rudius tried explaining that he'd also had it difficult, Paul grew even angrier, and asked why he didn't try to learn about other victims of the disaster while he was on the demon continent. However, Rudius never realized it, so as he tried explaining that he had a lot on his plate, Paul began saying that he was useless for spending all his time trying to help a demon. As these words made Rudius angry, Paul went on to say that he was basically adventuring with a cute rich girl like they were on vacation. But Rudius tried explaining that he had no idea what went on. Even so, Paul wouldn't cut him some slack, and began saying that he refused to write any letters because he was afraid that extra guards from Eris's grandfather would get in the way of his love affair with Eris. Just as Rudius heard enough, he began screaming that he didn't write any letters because it didn't occur to him. So when the hot chick tried calming Paul down, Rudius figured he was having an affair with her. Wanting to clap back, he began telling his father that he had no right to lecture him about women, and wondered if their mother and Lilia knew he was hanging out with a new chick. But when he told Paul to keep his seed from producing another sibling, Paul silenced him with a punch, and demanded to know if he passed through Zantport. However, Rudius could care less and tried fighting back, so as he dodged Paul's kick, seeing through his next move, he knocked him onto the roof. Before Paul could move, he began punching his face, putting his resentment into every blow, and saying that he didn't deserve to be blamed for anything. Just then, a girl pushed him, but as Rudius realized she was his sister, she told him to stop bullying her father. At that moment, Rudius realized that everyone was thinking the same thing, so as he began to leave, he thought he would convince himself that nothing happened, so that he could leave the town immediately. However, Paul decided to tell him that everyone in their village was caught in the disaster, and that he left a message at the Adventurers Guild in Zantport. He thought it was his fault for not reading it, and said that a lot of people died while he was taking it easy on the road. He could blame no one else but Rudius, so as he revealed that even his mother and Lilia were missing. He explained that he formed this search and rescue squad to look for everyone who got teleported. When Rudius wondered why they were kidnapping people, Paul explained that some of them had been enslaved, and just as Rudius heard these words, he realized the kid he found in the abandoned church was one of the ugly losers who bullied Sylphiette. Later that day, after he returned to the inn, Eris and Ruijerd saw he was sad, but when she asked him what happened, Rudius revealed that his father was in the city. Figuring the old fart must be responsible for his sadness, Eris tried heading off to find him, but Ruijerd told her to comfort him instead. After fidgeting around, Eris decided to hold him close and told him that she was here for him. The following day, while they were having breakfast, Rudius noticed his father's presence, so just as Eris sensed his discomfort, she demanded to know who Paul was. When he told her that he was Rudius's father, she told him to scram, but Paul tried teasing Rudius that he was hiding behind a girl. Just as Eris was about to punch him, Ruijerd stopped her and told her to leave them alone. Even so, Eris continued fighting, but he told her that fathers were far from perfect, and told Paul that the only thing that mattered was that his son was alive. While Paul and Rudius were alone, Paul started by saying that Ruijerd was an amazing guy. But when Rudius wondered why he came, Paul told him that he wanted to apologize. As Rudius began saying that he didn't have to, he told him that it had been like a game to him, and said it was only natural that he was angry. However, Paul thought he was making it too easy for him, and said he must have been doing everything he could. But Rudius told him that he had it easy. As he decided to ask what his letter was, Paul told him that the message was to search the north of the central continent for their family, but decided to ask Rudius what he intended to do now. Rudius told him that he intended to escort Eris home, and even when Paul told him that the towns and people had vanished, Rudius said he would continue anyway. However, he said he would search for their family afterward. But just as he tried to stand, the innkeeper asked him to look into Paul's face. At that moment, Rudius discovered he was teary-eyed, but when he realized he had seen a similar look before, he remembered that it was from his previous life, right after he stopped going out. He had only just beat his friend in a video game, but when the big mouth began saying that he wished he could spend all day gaming, Rudius grew angry, and began yelling at him for making a joke out of his predicament, shoving him onto the floor. Ever since that day, the boy never returned, and even though Rudius knew he overreacted, he never tried to apologize either. He could see now that Paul was actually different for coming out of his way to apologize, so as he told him that he had a suggestion, he asked that they pretend like nothing happened yesterday, and that they never had a fight. So as he directed his father to spread his arms and kneel down, he jumped into his arms, saying that he had missed him. When he wondered if Paul had nothing to say to him, Paul told him that he also missed him, and just as he began to cry, he said he'd thought they were all dead. As he hugged him tighter, he told him that he was sorry, but Rudius was surprised to see his father cry. After they returned to the inn, Rudius tried asking if they had another child, but Paul told him that he had been shooting blanks ever since they had his sister. Just then, Eris appeared with a black eye, But when Rudius wondered what happened, Ruijerd told him that it was the only way to shut her up. Noticing Paul, Eris wondered why the loser was here, but when Rudius told her that they made up, he said they were both human. So when Paul decided to apologize again, Ruijerd said it was worth it since they managed to make up. A few minutes later, after Rudius healed Eris's eye, he suggested they start their second strategy meeting, explaining that their situation had changed. When he began saying that crossing to the central continent would be easy, he told Eris that their hometown no longer existed, and said everyone was missing, with Ghislaine still not found. However, Eris told him that she was prepared for it, so Rudius suggested they leave the city tomorrow. Early the next morning, they were ready to leave, but when Norn wouldn't look at Rudius's wretched face, Ruijerd told her to cherish her siblings. Just as they rode off, Geese appeared, having been Paul's longtime friend, so as he told him that he was going to another great forest, Paul got inspired. So after he left, he told the girls that they were having a change of plans effective today, and asked them to get things ready for a meeting. As the days passed, Rudius and his party continued their journey across the lands, but when they came across an ugly bum who told them that he was the North God's pupil, introducing himself as Rodriguez, he challenged Ruijerd to a bout. So as Ruijerd accepted, he bashed the loser's face in no time. But after Rudius healed him, he began saying that he was hoping for another bout. By the time it was nightfall, they had made it to the sea on a boat, and even though the swaying motion made Rudius and Eris sick, Rudius noticed that Ruijerd was perfectly fine. With their journey having only reached the halfway point, Rudius hoped they would enjoy the rest of it, and be successful in their attempts to change the Spur's reputation. After Rudius returned to the heavenly realm, the man-god began wondering why he wasn't happy to see him, so Rudius told him that his shit advice landed him in prison. When the man-god asked if he was really to be blamed for everything, Rudius realized he wasn't, but admitted that he hated being back in his old body. So as he forced himself to be grateful for everything, he told the man-god to spill whatever else he had to say, and said he only wanted advice about where his family was. As the man-god agreed to reveal it, he asked him to promise that he would trust him every time, if his advice reunited him with the rest of his family. But Rudius promised to consider it if it worked out. Thinking that was good enough, the man-god decided to show him the future, saying that he would meet a girl named Aisha, but warned him to use a different name instead of his real one, and to get her to explain her situation. Once that was done, he wanted him to send a letter to someone in Shiren's royal palace, and said he would succeed in rescuing both Lilia and Aisha from the palace if he managed to do so. Hearing that, Rudius wondered why Lilia and Aisha had not been found already if they were so close by, but soon began vomiting back in the ocean. Early the next morning, after they arrived at the central continent, Eris was glad to be back on land, but they rode on a boat to Shiren. After they arrived at the capital, Rudius began thinking that the someone he was supposed to send a letter to was Roxy, but wondered why Roxy had not found Lilia and Aisha already. As he decided to tell Eris and Ruijerd about them, he asked that they help him gather information. But after they settled inside a room, Rudius decided to draft the letter, and after delivering it at the post office, a girl began following him as he left. Thinking he was being stalked, Rudius decided to enter an alley, and as he went through a series of alleys, he summoned a wall to protect himself. However, just as he began thinking he was safe, he realized he was in the exact place he had seen in the man-god's vision, and began hearing a girl's voice on the other side. With a touch, he dissolved the wall, but when he saw the struggling girl, he realized she was really the one in the vision. When the men tried explaining that they were from the palace garrison, and said they intended to return the lost girl home, the girl began saying that they stole her letter. Just as she snatched it away, she hid behind Rudius and asked him to save her. So as Rudius trapped them inside mud, one of them whistled for backup. But when the men gathered, Rudius launched away with the girl. After they arrived at his room, the girl introduced herself as Aisha Greyrat and thanked him for rescuing her from her predicament. When she wondered what his name was, Rudius remembered what the man-god told him. As Aisha began to explain that her mother was imprisoned in the castle, she said she wanted to send a letter to her father, but Rudius wondered how she became so clever. However, when he wondered why she wouldn't send the letter to her older brother, Aisha began saying that her brother was a useless, unreliable piece of shit. She went on to reveal that he was a perv ever since he was born, even devoting himself to a pair of women's underwear. Hearing all that, Rudius realized this must be the reason why the man-god told him to use an alias, but he told her that he would save her mother. Early the next day, a girl arrived at their room, and as she introduced herself as a member of the 7th Prince of Shiren's royal guard, saying that her name was Ginger, she asked him to accompany her to the royal palace. When Rudius asked why, she told him that Roxy was summoning him. That name made Rudius excited, so as he decided to pack up his bags, he told Eris and Ruijerd that he was going to see his master. So as they went up into the castle, Ginger told him that Roxy had revealed a lot about him, and led him through the back. However, when they arrived at the end of a hallway, Rudius realized the guards were the same schmucks from the previous day. But the girl offered to take his staff and bags. With Rudius totally clueless, he handed them over, but when a man summoned him from the inside, Rudius realized he was the ugly Fatzo Roxy had mentioned in her letters. Just then, he noticed Isekai'd on the floor, but when he wondered where Roxy was, a guard yanked the mat off, sending him falling into a hole. Noticing he was inside a magic circle, Rudius hit a barrier when he tried to leave, and as he tried casting a spell, it extinguished instantly. When the ugly kid who was shaped like a walking drum began saying that he created the barrier to capture Roxy, he said he was powerless against it, and revealed that his name was Pax. He said he was the 7th Prince of Shiren, so when Rudius tried asking to see Roxy, he told him that she wasn't here, and said he would use him as bait to lure her in. Thinking this was a big misunderstanding, Rudius tried explaining that he was only her former student. But the brain-dead kid told him that he'd make the perfect bait, and decided to shut the hole. At night, an ugly-ass man entered the dungeon, and as he introduced himself as Zenoba, the 3rd Prince of Shiren, he showed him Ruijerd's figure, and began saying that he had been studying his work every day, and asked that he allow him to call him master. Just as he tried to kiss his feet, he bumped into the barrier, but Rudius realized that this f***ing dude was a clown. Meanwhile, the palace garrison had snuck Ruijerd, Eris and Aisha into the back of the castle, and as they thanked them for coming, they revealed that Rudius had been imprisoned in the palace dungeons. After they explained that Pax took their families hostage, Aisha affirmed that it was true, but just as Eris agreed to save them, Ruijerd told the brat to watch over Aisha, and said that it was important to keep her safe. Before long, Eris and Aisha began hearing noises inside the castle, so when the palace garrison realized that it was an emergency, they heard Pax screaming. When Ginger tried to stop the menace, he merely walked past them, so Aisha revealed that he was nicknamed the Decapitator Prince because he was born special and strong. Inside the dungeon, Zenoba was asking Rudius how he wanted him to terminate Pax, so as Zenoba began trying to rip the Fatzo's neck off, he finally agreed to release Rudius. By the next day, Rudius was freed, and as they all left the castle, the guards reunited with their families. A few hours later, when Rudius and his party were about to continue their journey, Lilia summoned him, and gave him his old box. It was her old underwear he always sniffed, so as the thought made his face turn red, Lilia told him that she kept it for him. When Rudius noticed the necklace, Lilia told him that Sylphiette planned to send it to him for his 10th birthday. But as she pulled him closer to her, she wished him a happy birthday, and said she was glad that he was safe. Just as Aisha began approaching, Lilia shut herself up. But Aisha decided to ask Rudius if she could accompany him on his journey. She told him that her mother wanted her to serve her half-brother when she was older, and asked him to save her from the stinking perv. But Rudius knocked her head. However, when he decided to give her his headband, he told her to hold on to it as a memento, and she got excited. So when they waved each other goodbye, Aisha apologized for calling him a perv, but as Rudius realized what that meant, they figured she had discovered he was her useless horn dog of a brother. A few days later, while Rudius and his party were traveling across the mountains, Rudius grew exhausted, but they eventually made it to a village. That night, Eris noticed dragons flying, and as she was excited to see them, she began saying that she wanted to hunt one, but Rudius laughed at her useless face. The following night, Ruijerd and Eris began sparring, but as Eris narrowly missed his face, she parried his attack, nearly cutting through his spear as she eventually forced him to back away. However, when Ruijerd resumed his relentless onslaught, he eventually pinned down her blade, but with Eris already exhausted, Rudius began applauding her. A few minutes later, Ruijerd told Eris that she could now call herself a warrior, and said she'd grown up, as he explained that she had the strength of a full-fledged warrior. With Eris trying to contain her excitement, she began saying that it must be a dream, and asked Rudius to pinch her. As Ruijerd warned her not to get conceited, he said he'd never treat her as a child anymore, but Eris was still excited. By the next day, they had begun moving across the mountains, but with Rudius barely keeping up, Eris dragged him to see the dragons. She told him that she couldn't wait to fight one, but Ruijerd wished she'd use her brain for once. While they were walking through a passage, Rudius began asking how strong the dragon god was, but when he realized Eris and Ruijerd had stood on a spot, he wondered what had gotten into them. As he decided to look into the distance, a man and a girl began approaching, but as they walked past them, the man stopped. He had noticed Rudius's gaze, but when Ruijerd warned them not to move a muscle, their camel went into a frenzy and jumped off the cliff. At that moment, the man wondered if he just heard them say Ruijerd Spurdia, but when Rudius tried using his eye of foresight, the man's aura nearly blinded him. When he asked if Eris's name was Greyrat, he told Rudius that he didn't recognize anyone with a face as pathetic as his, but when Ruijerd asked who he was, the man began leaving. However, Rudius decided to open his big f***ing mouth and told him that his name was Rudius Greyrat. When he asked the man what his name was, the man said Orsted, but when he asked if he had met Eris and Ruijerd somewhere, Orsted told him that they hadn't met yet. However, when he wondered who his father was, Rudius revealed his father's name, but Orsted thought his father should have never had a worthless son like him. Somehow, Rudius found that amusing, but when Orsted began advancing closer, he noticed just how ugly Rudius was and asked what he wanted to know. When Rudius asked if he knew something about the Mana Cataclysm, Orsted said that he didn't. But when he wondered if Rudius had ever heard about the man god, Rudius tried saying that he saw him in his dreams. But Ruijerd narrowly saved him from another Isekai. As Orsted thought he was an apostle of the man god, Ruijerd screamed at Rudius to run. But Orsted began parrying all of his attacks. When Ruijerd charged back, Orsted blocked with a single hand while hitting Ruijerd's ribs. And even when Ruijerd increased the speed of his strikes, Orsted jabbed him in the belly, following with counter strikes that sent Ruijerd flying. With Ruijerd knocked out, Rudius soon noticed Orsted before his eyes, and as he sensed the danger for the first time, Eris came charging in. However, Orsted easily held her blade before knocking her away and said she still lacked polish even with her potential. Just as Rudius saw his future, the vision scared the shit out of him, so when Orsted ripped through his insides, he told him to tell the man god that Dragon God Orsted would kill him. Just as he began to leave, Eris tried casting a fire spell, but it extinguished instantly. Noticing Orsted's distraction, Rudius launched a stake that broke into pieces, but when Orsted realized it was incantationless casting, he wondered if the man god gave him the power and used disturb magic to cancel his consequent attempts. Just as Rudius tried to use his wind magic, Orsted repelled him away, so as he realized Rudius was crafty, he summoned a dragon barrier. Even so, Rudius wouldn't give up, so as he summoned a fireball, he continued filling it up with mana until it increased in size. However, when he launched it, Orsted activated his front worm gate to take the blast. But with the large quantity of mana, Orsted thought he was on par with Laplace, but he decided to ask Rudius why he wasn't trying to heal his lungs instead. As Rudius drew his last breath, he realized he was really going to die. But Eris was crawling towards him, begging him to stay alive, and began screaming for help. By the time Rudius opened his eyes, he realized he was back in the heavenly realm, and as he noticed the gaping hole in his heart, the man god began wondering how he was. Wondering if this dickhead was blind, Rudius wondered if he couldn't see the gaping hole in his chest, and asked why Orsted attacked him once he mentioned his name. The man god said it was because they were opposites, but when Rudius wondered why he didn't give him a heads up, the man god revealed that he couldn't see anything to do with the dragon god, and explained that there was a curse on him. As he went on to say that Orsted was one of the cursed children, he revealed that he had up to 4 curses on him, and said he was either hated or feared by every living creature in the world. However, when Rudius revealed that he didn't hate nor fear him, the man god told him that it was because he came from another world, and revealed that Orsted was the most powerful god on earth. When Rudius began leaving, wanting to pass on into the next life, the man god told him that he was not dead, so when Rudius opened his eyes again, he realized he was alive. When he asked Eris how it was possible, she told him that Orsted's companion had convinced him to cast a healing spell on them, and said her name was Nanahoshi. Just as Rudius noticed Ruijerd, Eris told him that he was only knocked out, so Rudius put his arms around Eris. As Eris pretended to punch him, Rudius noticed she was crying, and apologized for making her worry, but she continued to cry. A few nights later, after Rudius woke up from a bad dream, Ruijerd decided to ask him who the man god was, so after Rudius explained everything, Ruijerd realized that the man god and the dragon god were two of the 7 gods of ancient times. When Rudius went further to explain that the Spird's poor reputation was caused by a curse, he said that Laplace had transferred this curse to their spears and had put it on the Spird. However, the man god had told him that their curse had almost vanished, so Rudius explained that it had been fading since he shaved his head. Hearing these words, Ruijerd decided to turn away, but as Rudius realized he was overwhelmed, he pretended to fall back asleep. The following day, when they continued their journey, Rudius began trying to imitate Orsted's spell, and he told Eris that he intended to master it so that he could escape if he ever ran into him again. After they arrived at Rudius's village, Rudius realized that everything was truly completely destroyed, and as all the memories went through his mind, he remembered how his mother always welcomed him home. This was the place he once loved as his home, and as he walked towards the tree he often sat under with Sylphiette, he remembered how they always pursued each other. When Ruijerd and Eris joined him, Ruijerd began saying that they didn't need a babysitter anymore, but said he was in their debt. Wanting to take no credits, Rudius told him that he did nothing, but Ruijerd said he taught him so many more options than he'd realized. Showing his figurine, he said he couldn't have done anything alone, as he thanked Rudius for giving him the first step, and said that he saved him. Moving his gaze to Eris, he told her that she had enough talent to grow far stronger than him, but she thought his lying ass couldn't be farther from the truth. Even so, as Ruijerd asked to treat them like children one final time, he decided to rub their heads. And even though Eris was sad to know that he was leaving them, she managed to keep herself from crying out. Set your heart ablaze, go beyond your limits, and watch this next video.